Okay, Larry Yatch back again, and we are in part 2 of our 2-part series around responsibility. In the last lesson, we talked about the difference between having responsibilities and holding responsibilities. As a human being insufficient in this world to survive alone, we have more responsibilities than we have the capacity to hold, and we identified that our team is what fills that gap. Our ability to coordinate action with others, to pass the responsibilities that we don't have the capacity to hold to others for them to support us is how we get through this world. And not only is it how we get through, but the more efficient and effective we are at being able to pass responsibilities enables us to thrive. Now on teams, when I go into organizations, big organizations, and assess their teams, one of the things that I'm looking at very closely is their culture, their groups of observable actions around holding and passing responsibilities. Being high functioning as an individual or high functioning as a team is the same thing. It's the size of the commitments that you make, and it's your consistency in holding those commitments. So ultimately, your functional level as an individual or a team comes down to your ability to hold responsibilities. The bigger responsibilities you can hold and the consistency in holding them determines if you're high functioning, high value, or if you're low functioning and a drag on the team. In order to support you in being able to hold responsibility better, to be able to accept responsibilities, and to be able to pass them, we're going to talk about the 4 parts of responsibility. These 4 parts are absolutely critical, and I'm going to talk about it in a little story so you can understand it. Let's imagine that you don't know how to swim. If you don't know how to swim and you're in a rowboat in the middle, let's say a mile out in the middle of a freezing cold lake, do you have the responsibility of keeping that boat afloat? Now, if you have a desire to live, you can't swim, you're in the middle of the lake, it's obvious that yes, you have the responsibility of keeping the boat afloat. Now, do you have to be aware of that responsibility? Do you have to hold that responsibility? And most of you are going to think, yeah, of course, you have to hold the responsibility of keeping the boat afloat in order to stay alive. But the reality is, until the environment changes and the boat starts to sink, you don't have to hold the responsibility of keeping the boat afloat, even though you have it. Again, you can see that difference between having and holding a responsibility. But as soon as that boat starts to leak, it starts to sink, all of a sudden, if you have the desire to live and you don't know how to swim, you have to hold the responsibility of keeping that boat afloat. And that gives you insight into the first part of responsibility, which is awareness. You have to have awareness of both the actual responsibility and the implications of not holding it. What are the consequences? So it's both awareness of the responsibility, awareness that the boat is leaking. If it sinks, I'm going to die, I want to live. So it's awareness of that responsibility and the consequence, I'm going to get wet, cold, and eventually die if I don't keep this boat afloat. So it's awareness of the responsibility and it's awareness of the impact. The next thing you're going to need to be able to hold the responsibility of keeping that boat afloat is a standard of performance. How much water do I have to keep out of the boat in order to keep the boat afloat? If I don't have a standard of performance, it's impossible for me to effectively hold a responsibility except for by luck. Now think of how many times you've accepted a responsibility from someone without a clear standard of performance, right? A standard of performance would be how quick, how long, how much, right? Those details are critical to enable you to actually effectively hold the responsibility. On the other side of it, how many times have you passed the responsibility to someone in a way where you didn't give them a clear awareness of the consequence of not holding it, awareness of the responsibility, or the standard of performance? So now we've identified the boat's leaking, I have awareness of the consequence of not keeping the boat afloat. I have a standard of performance. I have to keep a minimum of 1 foot of water in the boat. If it gets over 1 foot of water, the boat's going to tip and I'm going to drown. So I have awareness, standard of performance. The next piece of responsibility is the ability to act, the power to act. If the boat's flooding at 1 gallon a minute and I have a little tiny teacup to try and get the water out, it's impossible. I don't have enough power to change the water level enough to be able to hold the responsibility of keeping the boat afloat. And you can see how these build on each other: awareness of implications, the standard of performance, and the power to act. If I don't have a standard of performance, it's impossible for me to assess my power to act. How much change do I have to be able to incur? So you would think that's it. If I have awareness of the consequences, I have awareness of the responsibility, I have a standard of performance, I have the power to act, I should be able to hold the responsibility. But it's actually the fourth part that's the most important. And that's a commitment to meet the standard of performance. Until I have and make a commitment to meet a standard of performance using my power to avoid the consequence, I can't possibly hold the responsibility. And this is another one. How many times do you toss your monkey on someone else's back without them actually committing to holding that responsibility, just making the assumption because I tossed it to them like a hot potato, they're going to take it? And how many times have you accepted a responsibility without making a commitment to meeting a certain standard of performance? You can look at these 4 steps as a safety net, both for yourself and for others. I won't accept a responsibility from anyone unless they give me clarity on the awareness of the responsibility and the consequence. They give me a clear standard of performance. I'm clear with them and they're clear on what power I need to be able to meet that standard of performance, and I commit to holding that responsibility. I won't accept it. And the same thing occurs when I'm passing responsibilities to my team. When I do that, we cover these things. I'll actually take some time and write it out. What awareness do they need? What's the standard of performance? What power to act do they need? And then are they going to make a commitment or not? And I actually have them repeat these 3 things and then make a commitment to me to hold that standard of performance. When we do that, not only does it protect me to ensure that that standard of performance is met and that responsibility is held, but it protects them from getting in a situation where they accept or make a commitment to something that they can't actually fulfill on. So this was one of the most powerful lessons that you could possibly get when it comes to your individual performance or your performance of a team. Almost everything we do within our company is to be able to optimize both individuals and the entire organizations and their abilities to pass and hold responsibilities better through behavior change. And so if this lesson was informative to you, if you see where you can use this and you have a problem with your team's holding responsibility, that's what we do all day and every day. All sorts of processes and systems to support you in not only being able to create a team that can hold their responsibilities well, but also pass them. So feel free to reach out to us. There'll be a link in the description below to be able to set up some time to talk to us, and or if you have any questions about this. And the last piece to this is every time someone is irresponsible, it's because they missed one of those 4 things. So that's what I'd love you to comment on. Think about the last time someone didn't hold a responsibility and comment below, what was it? Was it a lack of awareness? Was it an unclear standard of performance? Did they not have the power to act, or did they not make a commitment to hold that standard of performance? So that's going to be really informative, because now we can diagnose the problems. And when we have the conversation with the individual, it's no longer combative, like, why didn't you do that? Instead of that, we're able to identify why they weren't able to do it, and we can talk about how we change that in the future. So hopefully this was very useful. It's one of the core aspects of what made SEAL so effective, was their ability to consistently hold and pass responsibilities, and I'm glad to share it with you today.